Hi, this is Krista at the Secret Yarnery. Welcome to our crochet along number 3, row 6 to row 13, which is our pattern repeat. So this is what you're going to be doing for the rest of the shawl. You're going to be doing it 3 times. This is the first time. You'll be doing it 2 more times, and then it's border time. So grab your tea, grab your hook, get your yarn. Let's get started. So row 6, now it's a bit big for me to put the whole thing in the camera, but look for your dots, not your dots, your circles, your chains. And this row we're going to be starting the lace work or the shells. So this is when, if you're changing colors, if you're making your own self-striping shawl, this is where you're going to change your color. So let me show you how I do that. You can change your color any which way you want. But this is how I do it when I need to change at the end of a row. So I've made my last, well, it's a treble crochet to finish my last row. I'm just going to slide my hook down that same stitch. I'm going to poke it down in there the same way I came. Grab a loop of my new yarn. I'm leaving a longer tail because I want to sew it in with a needle. And I don't like fighting it. So I'm going to leave about 5-inch tail. Put that loop on your hook and bring it up and through. You're going to cut your old color yarn and just pull that up through the stitch, and then pull up this new color a little bit just so it's hanging out there for a minute or two. Your old yarn, I'm going to weave in the back loops of your shawl. So just through the back loop of these, I take it about 6 stitches forward, just so when I'm stitching into it, it kind of disappears. Don't have to sew it in so much later. But you can work in your ends however you want to. And if you're using a mandala yarn, you just keep going. Just totally ignore me right now. So like that, and then give it a little tug because you don't want it tight. So stretch it out, and then I'm going to bring it back the other direction 2 stitches and pull it to the back of my work. There. So now when I stitch over it, it won't stretch. The tail won't wiggle out. Okay, now back to the loop. We pulled through our new color, put it back on your hook, and if you haven't changed colors, that's absolutely fine. Now we're just going to keep going with our chart. So I'm holding my tail down and I'm pinching it just so I have some tension on my hook, and I'm going to look at my chart. It says chain 5. So that counts as our treble crochet and a chain 1. So chain 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Turn your work. Get that tail out of the way now. We'll have to sew the brown one in later. It says not into the first treble that we normally go into, and not into the second stitch. We're going to go into the 3rd stitch, and we're going to make a small shell of double crochet, chain 2, double crochet, all into the same stitch. So not into our first stitch, which is right there, and not into the second, but into the 3rd. So wrap your yarn into the 3rd stitch, double crochet, chain 2, and double crochet. Now it says skip 3 stitches, 1, 2, 3, and into the 4th stitch, 2 double crochets, chain 1, and 2 double crochets. So this, if you're reading the pattern, she calls this the big shell. So we're going to make a big shell in the 4th stitch. So wrap your yarn, skip 3, 1, 2, and 3, into the 4th, this guy here, 2 double crochets, 1, 2, a chain one, and 2 double crochets into this same stitch. So that's a big shell. So we have small shell and big shell. So skip 3 again, 1, 2, 3, into the 4th, 1, 2, 3, into the 4th, we make a small shell. Small shells are, oops, I split my yarn a bit. Small shells are double crochet, chain 2, and double crochet. Get my yarn cooperating. So we're going to alternate between making small shells and big shells into every 4th stitch all the way up to our chain 1 space. So wrap your yarn and into the 4th stitch we're going to make a big shell. So 2 double crochets, chain 1 and 2 double crochets all into the same stitch. Wrap your yarn into the 4th stitch, small shell, double crochet, chain 2, double crochet into the same stitch. Now here at the top it looks a bit funny because you're used to skipping 3 stitches and there's only 3 stitches, but there's not the 4th. But the 4th is actually this chain space. So you should have 3 stitches left. And now we're going to do all of our work into this chain 1 spot. So the chart, now it's telling us to make this. So that is 2 double crochet, chain 1, 3 double crochet, chain 1, 2 double crochet, all into that chain 1 spot. So let's do that. 2 double crochet, 1, 2, chain 1, 3 double crochet, 1, 2, 3, chain 1 and 2 more double crochet all into that same spot. If it gets a bit like full, you can pull your stitches back a little bit. Make sure they all get into that chain 1 spot. And it will be full, that's what it's supposed to be. Nice and big in that area. Now it says skip 3 stitches again. 1, 2, 3, into the 4th we make a small shell. So we're going to do the same as we did on this side. We're going to make both sides matching. So we're going to skip 3 stitches and into the 4th stitch a small shell. So wrap your yarn. The first stitch is just after the post, so if you count your stitches just like regular, 1, 2, 3, into the 4th we're going to make a small shell. So double crochet, chain 2, double crochet into the same stitch, like that. Wrap your yarn, skip 3 stitches into the 4th, you're going to make a big shell. So 2 double crochets, oops, chain 1 and 2 double crochets. So row 12, look for your circles. They're over here and there's 5 of them again. So let's do that. Chain 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Turn your work. Into this very first shell, we're doing a big shell because that's a small shell. So we do a big shell. 2 double crochets, a chain 1 and 2 double crochets. So now you're going to go all the way back along this row, doing the opposite of what you did in the row below. Big shells get small shells get big shells, and I'll meet you when we get down to the end, to the tip. Skip 3 stitches into the 4th small shell, so 1 double crochet, chain 2, 1 double crochet, skip 3 stitches into the 4th big shell, so 2 double crochet, chain 1, 2 double crochet. Oops. Split my yarn again. Skip 3 stitches into the 4th small shell, so 1 double crochet, chain 2, 1 double crochet. Now let's check our pattern, what it wants us to do at the end. So we've just finished our small shell. It says chain 1, skip a stitch, and treble crochet into the chain. So the last stitch is the one we're skipping, this guy, and chain 1, treble crochet into the chain. Chain 1, wrap your yarn twice, turn that chain down a little bit, not into that chain, not into the stitch, which is that first loop, but you're going over here. And do your treble crochet, and that'll finish off row 6. Row 7, you look for your dots, and they're over here. That's where we're going to start, and it's there. Well, they're circles, not dots. So you look for those. There's 5 this time, so it counts as a double crochet and the top of our small shell. So this row is going to begin and end with a small shell. So chain 3 for your double crochet and chain 2 more. So total of chain 5. Turn your work and into the top of that stitch where you started your chain. So you're going into the stitch down here. Same as usual. You can see it, it's hard in this color. But you're going into the stitch and making a double crochet. So that's going to finish off your small shell, which is now going to be at the beginning of your row. Then into the small shell below, you're going to make a big shell. So skip right over into the small shell, and you're going right into the big space. Right into the space. So that's super easy. This part goes much quicker now. So you're going to do a big shell. So 2 double crochets, chain 1, 2 double crochets into the same big space. Like that. Then you're going to skip right over to the chain 1 of your big shell, and you're going to make a small shell. So wrap your yarn, go over to that big shell, the chain 1 spot, and do 1 double crochet, chain 2, and 1 double crochet into the same space. And then jump over to the hole in your small shell and make a big shell. So if it's a small shell, you're going to make a big shell. If it's a big shell, you're going to make a small shell. So this one you're making a big shell, so 2 double crochet, chain 1, and 2 double crochet. Into the big shell, you're going to make a small shell. And you're jumping right over, there's nothing in between. So double crochet, chain 2, double crochet. The next one is a small shell, so you're going to make a big shell. 2 double crochets, 1, 2, a chain 1 and 2 more double crochets. Now we are into the interesting part, the top. And remember our last round we did all these double crochets into that spot. So now we have 3 chain spots to look for. Well, we have 2 chain 1 spots to look for, sorry. So now we're doing this nice part here, a bit interesting. So we're going to make a small shell into the first chain 1 spot. So go right into that first chain 1 spot and make a small shell of 1 double crochet, chain 2, and 1 double crochet into the same spot, chain 1, and now you have these 3 stitches together into the center of the 3 double crochets. So into the second stitch you're going to do a treble crochet because it has 2 lines across that T, so that means treble crochet into that center double crochet. So wrap your yarn twice, skip a stitch, and make a treble crochet. There's your treble crochet, chain 1, and into the next space do a small shell. So double crochet, chain 2, and double crochet. So that finishes the tip of our shell. I want to put a stitch marker in the top of this treble crochet. Just so we know, this is going to be the new tip of our shawl, and when we're coming around it can be a bit tricky to see. So just put a stitch marker in that treble. So now we finished this part here, the fancy tip. So now we're going to come back along this side, alternating big shells and small shells, just doing the opposite of what was the row before. So the next one gets a big shell, 2 double crochet, chain 1, 2 double crochet. Next one is a big shell, so it gets a small shell, double crochet, chain 2, double crochet. Next one is a small shell, so it gets a big shell. Big ones are 2 double crochets, chain 1, 2 double crochets. Next one is a big shell, so it gets a small shell. Double crochet, chain 2, double crochet, all into the same space. And the next one is a small shell, so it gets a big shell. Two double crochets, chain 1, and 2 more double crochets. Now we're going to look at our pattern. It'll tell us what we need to do. So into this last chain, so into the 4th chain, we're going to do a small shell. So we're going to skip a chain. We're skipping the stitch, we're skipping this double crochet, and we're skipping a chain, and we're going into the 2nd chain, or the 4th chain counting up, and we're going to do a double crochet and a chain 2 and another double crochet into that same chain space. Like that. So now we have finished row 7 and we have a stitch marker in our treble crochet. Now row 8, And as we go on with our chart and our cowl, we're going to be checking the beginning, we're going to be checking the tip, and we're going to be checking the end. The middle part, we're going to know what to do. That part's easy. But check the beginning, what you're supposed to do. Check the tip, how you're going to do that, and then check the end of your chart. So where our circles are, it says to chain 5. 4 for that counts as a treble crochet and 1 as a chain 1. So we're going to chain 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and turn your work. Now into the small shell right at the end, we're going to do a big shell. So now we're just starting our alternate. If it's a small shell, you do a big shell. If it's a big shell, you do a small shell all the way back along. So we're starting with a big shell. So I'll speed this up because you know what to do, and we'll stop when we get over here so we can do this new bit at the tip together. So I finished my last shell. I know I'm on this side, but that's just how the chart is. It's the same as here. So I finished my last shell, and into this top of the treble crochet, we're going to do a double crochet, chain 2, double crochet, chain 2, double crochet, all into the top of that treble. So that's why we put that stitch marker in, because now it's easier to see. So take your stitch marker out, wrap your yarn, go into that same stitch, and you're going to do 1 double crochet, chain 2, 1 double crochet, chain 2, and 1 double crochet, all into that same stitch. So now we finished that. Now we're scooting straight over, and it says, well, we just alternate. So we're starting again with a big shell because it's a small shell below. So right here, that very first shell, that's where we're starting. We're making a big shell in there. So now keep going down on this side, and I'll meet you at the end. At the end, it says to make that shell same into this, the one on the end, into that one we made. So make your big shell into there. So 2 double crochets, 1, 2, a chain 1, and 2 more double crochets. And then it says chain 1, and you're going to make a treble crochet into the 3rd chain. So chain 1, and then you can count your chains by these V's. So there's 1, 2, 3. So I'm going to do a treble crochet into the 3rd. So I'm going to poke in my hook, getting 2 loops on my hook, bring my yarn back, and just finish that treble crochet. So that'll just pull up the edge of this shawl, like that. So that is row 8 finished. So here's row 9. Look for your circles or your chain stitches, and they're over here. It says chain 3. We're going to do a big shell right on the end of our shawl. And that chain 3 looks like it counts as a double crochet. So we're going to chain 3, 1, 2, 3, turn your work, and into that very first stitch, same place you did your chain. So the top of that treble, you're going to do one more double, well, you're going to do a double crochet, a chain 1, and 2 double crochets. And now you're just going to alternate all the way back, doing the opposite of what was done below. So into the big ones, you're going to do a small, and into the small, you're going to do a big. And I'll meet you when we get to the tip. So now up here, into this first space, this first shell, small shell, we're going to do a big shell. So into this space there, this guy, big shell, 2 double crochets, oops, chain 1 and 2 double crochets, chain 1, treble crochet into your double crochet. So wrap your yarn twice and into that stitch, that center stitch, treble crochet, chain 1, and into this shell on this side, big shell. So into that small shell, big shell, right there. Right, we're still working at that tip. So 2 double crochets, chain 1, and 2 double crochets. So now we're going to work all the way back, just doing the opposite. So we finished this shell here, so now we're working on this shell here. So into here, the next big shell gets a small shell, big shell, small shell, meet you at the end of this row. So into this last big shell here, we do our small shell, like a regular, double crochet, chain 2, double crochet, and now it says into the top of the chain 4, we're going to build a big shell. So you can count your chains up, or you can skip a chain. So remember your stitch is this hole here. You can see. And then that's your first chain. So you're going to go into your second chain, which is this guy over there. And you're going to build a big shell. So 2 double crochets, chain 1, and 2 double crochets all into the same space, the same stitch, like that. So that is row 9 finished. So row 10, look for the circles again, the chains, and it says again we're going to do 5. So 1 counts as your treble and 1 counts as a chain 1. I had to join my yarn. There was a knot in it, which I didn't want to keep. So sorry about that, but yours will look nicer than mine. So chain 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Turn your work. Now you just do your shells all the way back. So the first one is a big shell, so you're going to do a small shell. So you're going to start with a double crochet, chain 2, double crochet, and then alternate all the way back down your row, doing a big shell, a small shell, a big shell, a small shell, opposite of what you did in the previous row. And I'll meet you at the chain 1 space. Well, that's not a chain 1 space. I'll meet you at the tip. Now at the tip, this on this side, that is a big shell, so you're going to do a small shell into it. So double crochet into the chain 1 space, chain 2, double crochet. Now into the top of this treble, into the stitch, you're going to do 2 double crochet, a chain 1, 3 double crochet, a chain 1, and 2 double crochet, all into the top of that treble crochet. So wrap your yarn and go into that stitch. So you want that V on the top. I'm splitting my yarn again. There we go. So 2 double crochet, a chain 1, 3 double crochet, a chain 1 and 2 double crochet. So that finishes that very top cluster kind of thing. And now into this one here, that one's a big shell, so you can do a small shell straight into that guy and then alternate all the way back down until the end of this row. So small shell here, and then work your way back, big shell, small shell, big shell, small shell, and I'll meet you when we get to this end. So at the end, oops, let's pull that stitch out. So at the end, we're going to do a small shell into the big shell on the very end of the row. So that guy there is going to get a small shell. So double crochet, chain 2, double crochet. Then we're going to chain 1 and treble into the top of the first chain 3. So chain 1 and wrap your yarn twice and treble crochet into the top of the chain 3. So not into the double crochet, but into the top of the chain 3. Treble crochet. And that finishes row 10. But you can kind of start to see how the pattern is getting so delicious. Can't wait. So row 11, again, look for the circles. They're on this bottom corner now, and there's 5 of them. So 3 count as your double crochet, and 2 count for the center of a small shell. So let's chain 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Turn your work. And into the top of that treble, into the very first stitch, 1 double crochet. So that makes your first shell. So just into that first stitch, 1 double crochet. So now we're starting our row with a small shell. Into the next small shell, we're making a big shell. And now we're just going to alternate all the way down this side. So just keep going, doing the opposite, making the opposite shell of what is below. And I'll meet you when we get to the tip. Now I've done this big shell here. And now we're into this nice cluster we built down below. So into the first chain 1 spot, we're going to do a small shell, and then a chain 1, a treble crochet into the center, and another small shell on the other side. So let's start doing that. Into the first chain 1 space, double crochet, chain 2, and double crochet, chain 1, wrap your yarn twice into the second stitch, or the center of these 3, the second of the 3. You're going to do a treble crochet and a chain 1, and then into the next chain 1 spot you're going to build a small shell. So that's double crochet, chain 2, and double crochet. Like that. Now again, I'm going to get my stitch marker just so I mark that treble crochet. I want to know where it is when I'm coming around. And now I'm just going to alternate doing the opposite of the row below, all the way back, and I'll meet you when we're at the end. Now at the end of this row, I've done the last big shell into my small shell, and now there is this chain space down here, the chain 5, So we're going to do a small shell into the 4th chain down, or the 2nd chain over, basically. So I'm just going to count from my double crochet, so not my double crochet and not the next chain, but the next one over. So I'm going to skip one chain. I'm skipping the stitch and a chain, and I'm doing a double crochet, chain 2, and double crochet into that same stitch or that same chain, and now we've made a shell right on the end. Oops, how can I get that lined up? Take my hook out, I guess. So we've done our shell. That's the end of row 11. Now I finished the last big shell, and now we're working on our tip, the tip of our shawl, and that is here. So we're going to be doing double crochet, chain 2, double crochet, chain 2, double crochet, all into the top of our treble crochet where we put our stitch marker. So stitch marker out, and right into the top of that stitch, double crochet, chain 2, double crochet, chain 2, double crochet. So all of that is this bit here. So we finished that. Now we're just going to go back down this other side doing the opposite, which the opposite of the shell below. So into the small shells, big shells, into the big shells, small shells. So we've done our last small shell into the big shell. So the next one on the corner, this guy here, is a small shell. So that guy is going to get a big shell. So right on the end, build a big shell of 2 double crochet, chain 1, 2 double crochet, and then chain 1 and treble crochet into the chain 3. So chain 1 and treble crochet into the chain 3. So there's 1, 2, 3. So wrap your yarn twice, and into the 3rd chain from the bottom, do your treble crochet. Like that. So that's the end of row 12. So row 13, look for your circles again, and they're over here. So there is 4 chains, 4 circles is 4 chains. So chain 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and turn your work. Into the first stitch, right at the edge, 2 double crochets into the same stitch. So right into that first stitch, that first one, 2 double crochets. I split my yarn. 1 and 2. 1 into the chain. 1 into the chain space. So just put that down into the space in there. And then 5 into the shell. So 1 into each double crochet and 1 into the chain. So 1 into each stitch. 1, 2. The 3rd one goes into the chain 1 space. And then the 4th one into the double crochet. And the last one, the 5th one, into that double crochet that's off to the side there, this guy. Let's see it. But that guy, that's your 5. So for these ones, you might want to count to 5. And now into the small shells, you're going to put 3, just into the space. 1 double crochet, 2 double crochets, 3 double crochets, and then you're going to put your 5 into the big shell. So 1 into each double crochet and 1 into the chain 1 space. So 1, 2, 3 is into the space, 4 into the stitch, 5 into the stitch, and then 3 into the small shell, just into the space. 1, 2, 3, and then 5 into the big shell, 2 into the first 2 double crochets, so 1 into the double crochet, 2 into the double crochet, 3 into the space, 4 into a double crochet, and 5 into a double crochet. Like that. And then 3 into that space, into the small shell, the space of the small shell. 2 and 3. Those just all go into the space. Next big shell gets 5. So 1 into the first stitch, 1 into the second, 1 into the chain space, 1 into the next, and 1 into the next. So that's 5. Three into the space of the small shell. 2, 3. 5 into the big shell, into the stitches and the chain 1 space. So first one into a stitch, second one into a stitch, oops, third one into the space, fourth one into a stitch, and the fifth one into a stitch. Now 3 into the space of that small shell, all into the space. That's 3. Five into the big shell, into the stitches and the chain 1 space. 2, 3, 4, and 5. And now we are at the tip area. So let's check what she wants us to do. Into the first small shell, or the first half of the tip, that space, to do 3, like regular. So 1 into the space, 2 into the space, and 3 into the space. Then into that stitch, into the center double crochet, 2 double crochet, chain 1, and 2 double crochet. So that's going into the stitch at the top, the double crochet. So 2 double crochets, chain 1, and 2 double crochets into the same stitch. So we finished the tip of our shawl. Now into this next spot, 3 double crochets into the space. 1, 2, and 3. And now we're just going to continue down, doing 5 double crochets into the big shells and 3 double crochets into the center of the small shells and 5 into the stitches of the big shells all the way down, and I will meet you when we get to the edge. So we did our last 5 stitches into our last big shell over here. So now it says put 1 into the chain space, so 1 into that space, the big loopy thing over there, and then 2 double crochets and a treble. It's hard to see, but there's 2 lines. It ends in a treble crochet on this side. So 2 double crochets and a treble crochet into the top of the chain 4. So you can just count your V's up, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So into that 4th chain, double crochet, so 2 double crochets, and then wrap your yarn twice and 1 treble crochet into the same spot. There's our treble. So that was row 13 finished, which finishes the chart, and we go back to row 2. Row 1, row 2. So now the repeat starts here. So repeat is row 14, which is what we're on now. Not that we totally need this, but we kind of do. So we're always going to start with our circles, same as always. So we're going to start by chaining 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Turn your work. 2 double crochets into the first stitch. 1 and 2 into that first stitch, and then 1 into the next stitch, and every stitch until you get to the chain 1 space. So just pretend this is like there's a dot dot, like we're not counting stitches here, it's giving us the idea of what to do. So we're going to do this for a lot longer, but we're going to do 1 double crochet into each stitch until we reach the chain 1 spot. So that's pretty easy. 1 double crochet into each stitch until you get to the chain 1 spot at the tip of your shawl. So keep your eye out for that chain 1 and make sure you go into that stitch before the chain 1. This guy here, that is a stitch. So make sure you don't lose him. Into the chain space, 2 double crochet, chain 1, and 2 double crochet into the chain 1 space. So just into that space, 2 double crochets, chain 1, and 2 double crochets. Now 1 double crochet into each stitch all the way back down this side. So 1 into each, and I'll meet you at the end. So I have 1 more stitch to go into. And then we're going to look at our chart. It says 2 double crochets and a treble crochet into the top of that chain 4. So wrap your yarn. I just turn that chain towards yourself so you can see that V and poke your hook in. So 2 double crochets, 1 and 2, and a treble. So wrap your yarn twice for a treble crochet and finish the same way. So there is 2 double crochets and 1 treble crochet into that last stitch. So we are done with our second time with row 2, or our row 14, and moving on to our row 3, which is going to be our row 15. So start with our chains on this side. So chain 4, 1, 2, oh, guess I could do it on the camera. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Turn your work. 1 double crochet into the first stitch, just that very first one. chain 1, double crochet into the next stitch, chain 1, and then skip a stitch, double crochet, chain 1, skip a stitch, double crochet, chain 1, skip a stitch, double crochet, chain 1, all the way back along. So now we're making our windows. So skip a stitch and into the second stitch, double crochet, chain 1, skip a stitch into the second stitch, double crochet, and repeat this all the way down. Getting close to the end. One more to go. So chain 1, skip a stitch, which gets us into the very last stitch before the chain 1. Just this guy here. So chain 1, and then into the chain 1 space, double crochet, chain 1, double crochet into that chain 1. So into this space. In there. Double crochet, chain 1, and double crochet into the chain 1 space, chain 1, and into the very next stitch, double crochet. So that is this guy right there, double crochet. So now you're going to chain 1, skip a stitch, and double crochet all the way back down this side, and I'll meet you at the end of this row. So chain 1, skip a stitch, double crochet into this last stitch, and now the pattern says chain 1 and a double crochet and a treble into the top of the chain 4. So chain 1, that guy, and into the very first chain. So just roll that chain towards yourself and poke your hook in. So that'll get you 2 loops on your hook, double crochet, and then wrap your yarn twice for your treble crochet into the same spot. So that is row, I should have them written down actually here, but row 14, row 15 is finished. So row 16, same as row 4. We're just using these ones for the beginning and the center and the end bit and the idea of what to do along the side. Obviously, your work is bigger than this already. So we're going to start with a chain 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Turn your work. 2 double crochets into the first stitch. Just into that first one. 2 double crochets. 1 and 2. One double crochet into the next stitch. Just that guy. And then 1 into the chain space, 1 into the stitch, 1 into the chain space, 1 into the stitch, all the way back until the tip of your shawl, the chain 1 spot. So we just put 1 into the stitch, so we'll put 1 into the space. Into the stitch, into the space, into the stitch, into the space. So we do this all the way down to the tip of the shawl, and I'll meet you back. Just pause the video. Here is the tip of the shawl. It kind of looks like there's 3 double crochets there, but you'll see if you push your stitches around that this is into a stitch. So your corner is here. That's your chain 1 space. So into the stitch, double crochet, and then into the chain 1 space, 2 double crochet, chain 1, and 2 double crochet. So into this space there. Two double crochet, chain 1, and 2 double crochet into that same space. So that is our tip of our shawl. If it gets tricky to see, you can always put a stitch marker in there. Then you know that that's the tip of your shawl. Now continue going all the way back this side, starting with that very first stitch, double crochet into the stitch and into the space, all the way back down, and I'll meet you at the end of this row. So just pause the video. So now let's just follow the pattern to the end here. I have another space, so double crochet, oops, into that space and into the stitch. And now I've gone into that. Now I just have my chain left. So the chain is 2 double crochet and a treble crochet into the chain. So just tip it up, push your hook in, 2 loops on your hook, 2 double crochets, 1, 2, and 1 treble. So wrap your yarn twice. There. So that finishes that row, our second time with round 4. So moving on to our row 5, although obviously we're past it, but we're using it again. We're using it again for how to begin, how to do the corner, and how, like the tip of the shawl, and how to do the other end. And obviously what to do in the center. So it starts with chain 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Turn your work. 2 double crochets into the same stitch or the top of the treble crochet, the first stitch. So 2 double crochets into the first stitch, and then 1 double crochet into the next stitch, and each stitch going along the side. So this is pretty easy. Keep going and I'll meet you at the tip of this shawl. So at the tip of the shawl, make sure you go into that last stitch, and we put our stitch marker, so that makes it easy to know where we're at. And we're going to do 2 double crochets, a chain 1 and 2 double crochets into the chain 1 space. So into that space, 2 double crochets, a chain 1, and 2 more double crochets. Now 1 into each stitch, going all the way back along this side, and I'll meet you at the end of this row. Make sure you get into this last stitch. That guy counts. And now we have our chain left. So if you look at your pattern, or you look at your chart, 2 double crochets and 1 treble crochet into the top of that chain 4. So wrap your yarn, turn that chain towards yourself so you can poke at it a bit better. Get your hook in, 2 loops on your hook, bring your yarn back and make your double crochet, your first one, make your second one, wrap your yarn twice and make your third one. Well, not your third one, your third stitch, but a treble crochet. So that is the end of row 5. So this is the end of one rotation, or one pattern repeat, I should say, from the shells to the end of your 4th row of double crochets. So how you're going to keep going is every time, you're either just going to keep going, repeating this pattern from row 2, oops, there's my stitch marker, repeating from row 2 all the way to row 13 over and over again. Every time you get to row 6, this is the first round of loops, or of shells. For every time you start row 6, you'll change color if you're not using a mandala yarn. If you're using mandala yarn or self-striping or changing, you just keep going. If you're changing your own color, you're going to want to change for your row 6, or your first row of shells, every time. So our next row is going to be row 6, which is our row of shells. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put the timers in the description box below of row 2, row 3, row 4, row 5, row 6, row 7, blah, 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 blah. So whatever row you're working on, you can just click the timer button and it'll click you to that row, so you can kind of get in, you can see the row you're working on. So I will do that in the description box below. You keep going for your next 2 more color changes. My next row is going to be in natural cotton, which won't show up well at all for filming, and then my next one is going to be peach. So mine's going to go like that, but bigger obviously. And then my final row will be the same as this, the nice coral at the very end. You'll have 2 weeks to get your 3 color rotations done, or your 3 panels, or 4 including this one. And on March 23rd, so 2 weeks from this Friday, we will have the border cowl up, where we'll be working on the border together. So thanks so much for watching. I'm really looking forward to seeing your cowls. Post your pictures on the Facebook group. Please like, subscribe, and share, and stay hooked.